subcommittee.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's fine.
So wait.
I'm sorry, but yeah, I'm sorry. I mean to cut you off, but go ahead.
Well, we're jumping. So what are you doing with salaries for paras and ESP? At this time, you want to table it and then do the subcommittee, or you want to give us your proposal so then at least we can see it and look at the.
What? I'll say, who's that?
Do you want to give us your proposal and then at least let us look at it before we do the subcommittee so then we can have an intelligent conversation about it? I mean, what is it?
Here's what I think.
You talked a lot, but what's the goal? Where are we?
Here's what I think makes sense, okay? Is that if you're in agreement to create the subcommittee, right? Then let's start with the subcommittee, because then we have the data. We will have the data in front of us and anything else that we need to kind of have the conversation, right? As opposed to giving you the proposal across the table right now, right? So we look at the financing, right? Go through it, and forgive my language. I'm not a finance person, so I'm just going to use layman's term. So we had the committee together, the appropriate people ask me, the employer, PEA, we go through the data, all right? We see what's there and generate the conversation, start the conversation at that point, right? We can give you a proposal across the board, across the table right now, but I suspect, all right, and I'm not sure about this, but I suspect that takes us just a little bit closer to establishing a position, right? And, but I believe that if we create the committee first, bring the people together, look at the data, understand that because we agree, the employer agrees that paraeducators and ESPs have earned a wage increase. That's what your proposal said, right? So, okay, so that'll be the conversation of this committee and what's there and what's not, et cetera, et cetera. And we have the expertise and the people to bring to the table. I know ASME definitely does. And of course, obviously you guys do too. But so that's my goal, if we can, is if you agreed to create this committee, then let's create it. We've got, what, 3 days already established for negotiations. And maybe we can use those 3 days to have that kind of conversation and review the finance, I should say.
Okay, so I don't disagree with that. The only thing is, going back to something you said, it doesn't help people now. And so
what do you mean?
She said, in terms of moving it forward and helping people now, what are we trying to do right now?
Negotiate wage increases for paraeducators.
We don't agree.
People leaving. I think that's my point.
Well, so we don't agree that we think and have looked at your budget and have pulled out more money. We have historically been right there where you have money. And we think you can do better than $11 an hour and a 2% for everybody else. So that's our preliminary position right now. And we have a proposal, and we can pass papers back and forth across the table, but we were hoping that this isn't going to be dragged out. Like, we want to get the subcommittees done, like maybe Thursday, maybe instead of doing a full negotiation, maybe this subcommittee meets on Thursday instead, and then we bring something back the next Thursday.
Okay.
And so this is not a delay tactic. This is something that we want to do fairly quickly.
Oh, hold on. I'm so sorry. I did not intend to make it seem as if it was a delay tactic. I was just trying to see if we could, in your view, move the ball forward to help people right now.
And so we could even, after, I don't know how long tomorrow's meeting is going to be, because you're just doing with the school board to advertise the budget, right? Correct. And so that shouldn't be a very long meeting. We could even meet tomorrow afternoon if we agree that we want to do this subcommittee, but even before we come back to the table on Thursday. Okay. We wanted to propose this being more of a partnership with this wage increase instead of us just passing papers back and forth.
Okay. So yes, we agree to the subcommittee. Heather, you good?
We agree.
So we could do the subcommittee.
And we can meet.
I have a meeting from 1 to 2 tomorrow that I have to attend. We could meet from 2 to 5 if that would be okay with you.
Yeah, we can do that.
Can you do tomorrow?
No, this is for para ESP, not for.
Yeah.
So yes, we can do from 2 to 5 tomorrow.
If that's not okay. Are you sure?
Yes.
That's fine.
Yes.
Okay. And do you want us to come over to you or do you want to come over this
If
way?
you want to,
I think it makes sense to go.
it's up to you, but if you want to come over, that'd be good.
Okay.
I can go to that and then we'll just,
Perfect.
how many people will you bring?
We'll probably bring us 3 and maybe 5 to 6.
Do you have room, Heather?
I'm gonna see if I can get the Title I conference room.
Okay. I won't be there. Tony, can you do it?
Absolutely.
Tony.
Yep.
It's an invite to all of us. It's an invite to Laura. Laura's going to forward it.
Okay.
All right. And while we're talking subcommittees, I know this is something that I had discussed with Mr. Hyde right as the TISA stuff was changing from this legislative session. It's even worse than it was last year as far as how they've made it more complicated. So there you go. And so we were also going to propose going into a subcommittee specifically for TISA to try to hash out, because it's just so convoluted and complex, because now you have pay for performance in play that we didn't have to deal with last year. There was the change in the grandfathered ratio to the, it's a kind of a mess. And so we wanted a separate subcommittee to just look at TISA and see if we can go through that and come up with something that makes sense for both sides, instead of us thinking that we've, again, you know, this is perfect, this is what is going to work, and then we don't want to end up where we ended up last year.
Okay.
And so we felt that it made the most sense to also go into subcommittee for TISA.
I'm good with that. It is rather complicated.
Yeah.
And actually,
And Angela is going to be on that subcommittee because she's been kind of our statewide expert with TISA. And so we wanted her to be available to be there as well.
do you have some dates you'd like to throw out, Angela?
I have Health Thursday. On my calendar. I have Thursday this week or next week, Tuesday or Wednesday.
I know next Tuesday is the board meeting, so that's, would next Wednesday work?
Bad day.
What'd you say?
Yes, Wednesday would work for us.
21st?
Next Wednesday,
28th.
the 28th.
Way to pass a note.
Airmail. Airmail.
Dates?
The
I'm sorry,
28th, sorry,
what time?
Wednesday, the 28th. Could we do you have a morning block open?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe 10 to
10 to,
1, 10 to
you want to do
2.
9 to noon?
That makes sense.
10 to noon?
9 to noon or 2?
Okay, we can do 9 to noon.
Well, actually, you're right. Let's do 10 to.
10 to 1?
Right.
Okay.
For TSIA.
Yeah, sorry, TSIA.
It may not take that long.
Okay. 10 to 1.
Where?
District office.
Sure.
Once you get a room or HR conference room,
I'll let you know.
we'll send it over to you, Angela.
How many on your team?
We were thinking 5 from our team. Angela included in the 5.
Do you foresee anything you need from us? Or not?
You can bring your proposal.
Well, that's the thing with the TSIA. We
Yeah.
you know, I that was one thing, first things I told Mr. Hyde was like, it's going to be impossible to come up with something and you guys come up with something.
We'll just have to pick a place to start and work through
Yeah.
it. So,
And we have some ideas on like how the ratios could best work, but it's going to have to be a very in-depth conversation.
yes.
But yeah, we'll bring, we kind of costed out 2 scenarios for paras and ESPs, and we can bring both of those to the subcommittee and kind of see what we were thinking, but then kind of work to see what makes the most sense.
That's good. And you all said you'd identified funds that you believe are in the budget. I'd like to see those and how you came up with that.
Okay.
So that we can work through that as well.
Sure thing.
We'll reach out to ask.
Oh,
Reach out to ask me.
yes. So we'll
Talk to Lisa.
We'll talk to Ms. Burke and see if she can, because she's not working just yet. So I'll see if she can make it tomorrow afternoon, because we definitely want, or if she can send representatives from ASME there.
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
Sure.
Do you want to move to the payroll frequency?
Now, at this point, we can introduce health insurance. Want to do health insurance and the stipends and so forth?
No, let's go to payroll frequency
Oh, that's right, the payroll frequency.
so we don't forget it.
Yeah.
So the second thing that we actually have language for you guys for is the payroll frequency. We have an MOU when we had changed to semi-monthly last year. We need to update that in our language and all 3 contracts so that it reflects the semi-monthly pay option for people that were hired prior to July 2020 and for people that are hired after July 1, 2020, that they are automatically on semi-monthly pay. And there were also 2 things in here that we'll go over that we wanted to have a topic of discussion about. Because there were 2 issues, as this was kind of new for all of us moving to semi-monthly. There were 2 issues, topics that we want to discuss with you guys that we saw some issues with. And we wanted to see if we could have a discussion about that. So that's for the ESP. This is the para. This is the teacher 22. And that's all for the payroll frequency.
Oh, thank you.
So just looking at the teacher, and all the language mirrors itself throughout the contract, are appropriate. They're all slightly different. And so with the teacher one, it starts on 22.15. And so we looked at the MOU that we have for semi-monthly and tried to capture what we thought made sense from that MOU and putting it in. And so in 22.15, 22.13, keep going. Want to read that. And again, this was us just trying to move stuff over from the MOU into here. So if something doesn't make sense or if we need to make adjustments, we're definitely open to that.
You talked about 2 issues.
So the 2 issues are in 22.15-4. And it's the highlighted part. We had several people reach out to us that were on a leave of absence during the window to switch over, the window that we give current employees that were hired prior to July 1 of 2020, the opportunity to move to semi-monthly pay. We had several people that were on a leave of absence while that window was open this year. And then they wanted to switch to semi-monthly. And then they were told no because the window had closed. And so we wanted to offer, if they are coming back from a district approved leave of absence during that window, that they could choose to switch to semi-monthly, obviously knowing that they can't switch back. And that's the same deal, that they can't switch back to annual or monthly pay once they switch over. But giving those folks an opportunity, if they were on a district approved leave of absence while the window was being offered, that they would have that opportunity. And then the second one was in overpayments. Sorry, underpayments, not overpayments. And underpayments, and this wasn't a particular issue that we had, but I know that some AFSCME folks had an issue, and it could very well happen to one of our people, is that it says that if they were on semi-monthly that they wouldn't be eligible for off-cycle payments. But if it's a district error in their pay, they should be made whole as soon as possible and shouldn't have to wait until even 15 days down the road. And so we wanted that if it was a district error or a management error, that anybody on semi-monthly pay would be made whole as soon as possible. And so those were the two topics of discussion in this payroll, in the payroll frequency updates. And this was all new to us, and so we thought we would bring this to the table and work out some kinks that we saw on our side.
So regarding, if I recall correctly, I remember having a conversation with Dana about why we couldn't add the people that were on leave or missed the window. Why couldn't we just add them? Mm-hmm. Systems issue, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. And so it is during the window, and maybe you can explain it better than I can, because I think I'm going to botch it. So during the window, it is easier for me to go in, or for payroll people to go in and make the change wholeheartedly, mm-hmm. right? Here are the people that need the change, period, done. Mm-hmm. Rather than now I got to go in and open it up to make the change specifically for Tony, specifically for Tedra, specifically for Laura. It's something like that. It's not as easy as just let me enter the SAP numbers and make the change. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Because the system is, I think, frankly, a bit older, mm-hmm. we have some system barriers there. It's not a district barrier, it's a systems barrier.
So what happens during the window then if I choose next year to go semi-monthly because I'm monthly paid now, like doesn't Dana and her team still have to go in individually and change that frequency?
Yes. It also deals with the employment calendar. So the window's set up for a specific time frame.
Mm-hmm. That's what it is too, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that if Heather goes on a 24 pay, then whenever the system calculates my payroll, then I'm given the correct amount because it divides it into those equal pays. If you miss the time frame where we set up all those, and like Tedra said, the system's older, so it's a little fussy at times, then that can cause people to be paid incorrectly, which leads to your other question of the off cycles. Mm-hmm. Because of the payroll dates, those, if we were to cut an off cycle check, it affects the distribution of the 24 pays in the way that SAP works. So it's not something that we can't look at and can't work through. But I don't believe that we can just say, yes, we'll do this, because we have to figure out the proper process to be able to do it and have our calendars remain intact and the calculations remain correct going forward.
It's a process question.
And so remember then too, when you switch to the semi-monthly, it's a 2-week delay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so if you do it in the middle, I think that's the other issue, is that it would be a full 4-week delay instead of a 2-week delay. I think it's a 4-week delay in the middle.
Yes, because of you're 2 weeks in arrears.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So then it triggers a whole set of other systems issues.
Is that something that you could maybe take back to payroll? And is there a way that we can work through that system and see if there's something there that can make sense?
Yeah, we'll definitely look into it.
Okay.
And I'll talk to our business systems analyst and see. Well, I'll work with him and
Okay.
Dana.
So then,
We did ask Dana though.
Mhm.
I mean, I remember asking her why we just can't do it. Like it seems easy enough in my mind, but I'm not that girl that works with SAP that much. So
in that language is in all three different articles. And so I'm just going to put a note. You'll
Check on it.
check on that and get back with us on that. I don't know, maybe Mike Jones or somebody has something that he can offer there.
I believe it would be a configuration change, which would involve a little bit more than that.
Okay.
I noticed in 22.18.
Oh, yeah. So that's going to parallel with something we're bringing with the activity pay.
Mhm.
But I know most of our, well, I wouldn't say most, but like the summer MOUs we did all were hourly rate of pay this year. And so bringing it up to where they're paid their hourly rate of pay for those workshops and conferences, we wanted to propose that as well.
How much will that be?
Well, whatever their hourly rate of pay is. So it's going to vary depending on who's going to what, how many extra hours. So there's really no way to cost that out per se, because it's going to vary.
Can we run a report to see how much we paid in training rate of pay? And then see if we could calculate their hourly rate of pay and see what the difference would be. The other part of that is MOUs are, most of these trainings are paid from general fund. Is that right, Heather?
Correct.
And so the majority, when we do MOUs and things, those are usually from grants. Yeah. So if we did like the TSIA, that's grant money. All of our ESSER funds, all of that stuff. So I think it would just, one, I want to look at how much it's going to cost overall. But then two, I think if we have to charge it back to the general fund, I'd rather remain at 1809. And then if you want to do the grant funds at the full hourly rate, then that may be an option. But to just say across the board that we do their hourly rate, I think that's going to be a a significant impact to our budget.
Well, let's see what that report says. And we're, because that's just something we couldn't run. And so definitely bring that back, and we're open to a conversation there.
Can you distinguish between what's grant and what's general fund? Okay.
We can.
Let's see what.
Then we stricken through the payroll frequency subcommittee because it's served its purpose. We had a strike through in that in all three contracts. And then, and again, when we were putting this together, we just tried to mirror what the MOU said. So if there's something that we clarified or, we're open to language tweaks there. We just wanted something to start with. Are there any other questions about the payroll frequency stuff? Now, there is something in para 19 and see 15 that you'll see. And it's the same language for both contracts. And it is related to salaries. Under like in para 1919 with raise and step increases, because para educators in our secretary clerical units are not dictated by the same legislative restraints that teachers are held to under law. We wanted to propose that para educators and ESPs in their corresponding Article 15 will receive an automatic level increase annually. And then any money left over for cost of living adjustments or other potential salary improvements would then be negotiated additional funding after the automatic level increase. And so you will see that language in 1919 for paras and for 1517 in the ESP contract, since we're looking at these articles. Yeah, 1517. As they are not governed by the same legislative restrictiveness as the state of Florida likes to govern their teachers. Not yet. We'll see. They just tend to forget about them overall.
Could I ask, on all three of the proposals, it says employees have hired after July 1, 2020. Should that be 2021? Or are you trying to go back in time?
Well, no, it just changed because that was it. Any employee that was a current employee before July 1 of 2020 is on annual contract, or not annual, monthly pay, excuse me. And then anybody hired after July 1 of 2020 was put automatically on semi-monthly pay.
Mhm.
And so that's to differentiate between employee groups, because anybody that was hired after July 1 of 2020 is not on monthly pay. They automatically went to semi-monthly. Only the folks that are still employed with us and were hired prior to July 1 of 2020 could possibly have monthly pay at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the distinction there.
So you're wanting pay more frequently than every 15 days?
No.
There's an error?
Oh, if there is a district management error in their pay, we are saying the district should make them whole, even if they're on semi-monthly. Because for a paraeducator or, even teachers, if you're a single parent as a teacher, it's hard to make it, and so if it's a district or a management principal error, those employees should be made whole as soon as possible. They shouldn't have to wait till their next paycheck, even if it's 15 days away, because 15 days away could be the difference of them getting an eviction notice or having their lights turned off if they don't feed their kids. And so if it's a district mistake, the district should make those people whole as soon as possible, and they shouldn't have to wait. That's what we're saying there.
Anything else here?
Not in 15 for ESPs, 19 for paras, and 22 for teachers now. So I have in my notes that Heather's going to run a report on the difference between the activity pay at 1809 and what hourly rated pay would have been. Correct. And you'll bring that back to us Thursday. Is that right? Okay. Ma'am? And I think probably
I will definitely work on that.
Okay. All right. So the next two things on our agenda were two subjects that Mr. Hyde wanted to talk about with instruction during district mandated COVID quarantines and planning time at our turnaround schools. And so I have people here that are not normally on our bargaining team to help speak to that, especially from our turnaround schools. And so do you have a preference on which one you guys want to discuss first?
Not really.
All right, so I guess let's start with the planning time at turnaround schools in case any of those folks need to leave before we're done.
Do we have that?
So I'll provide the story. So the background is,
there we go.
we submitted a request to the Florida Department of Education to utilize some of the CARES Act funds to best address the needs of our schools.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you just introduce yourself?
If you don't know who I am, frankly, your projects is far more jeopardy now. I am Fred Hyde. I'm your super.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
So we submitted a proposal. At the time of the submission, having worked at the department, I questioned whether they would approve it. They have subsequently rejected that request. So the point of it was to provide our teachers with additional planning time. If you recall from the elementary negotiations, they forfeited a lot of common planning time that could best be used, especially in our schools that are high needs, our turnaround schools. We need more planning time for our staff. So the recommendation, or excuse me, the proposal right now is that we essentially pay those staff for an additional hour of planning each day after school, to take place after school. At least 2 of those days would be directed, a minimum of 2 of those days would be directed, essentially meaning grade level teams could work with their building administrator to say, we're gonna meet every Monday and Wednesday. We don't care what day you meet. We don't care if you meet before school, you meet after school, but you have to document the hour in order to be paid. And essentially 1 day would be data review. The second day would be a version of your PLC so that you can start to put into place intervention plans, changing students with learning groups for tier 2 and tier 3 interventions, increase their frequency, be far more responsive in real time to the data, but we would pay those staff after school to implement that. That's the proposal. Obviously, we know we'd have to pay their hourly rate, but outside of that, and the only question I know that when I initially proposed it, that Ms. Yoakum presented to me was, would this be required or would it be voluntary? We have one other school that currently utilizes some of their Title SIG dollars to incentivize teachers after school, or actually, no, I rephrase that. We have one school, I'm trying to remember which school it was, starts with an M.
McLaughlin?
McLaughlin, thank you. By and large, as she shared with me, she has about an 80% participation rate, but it's largely voluntary. If we were to do this, quite honestly, I think it should be required of all staff because they would get paid at their hourly rate. Only 2 of those days, again, would have to be structured and scheduled within the building. The entire reason behind that is not to micromanage what's happening during that planning time, but to provide the resources that they best need and utilize. For example, making sure the reading coaches, math coaches, interventionists, school psychologists, social workers can also be included in that conversation, as well as paraeducators. So there is intentionality behind why to structure it that way and why to make it required, because if you make it voluntary, which I think is fine, in order to develop additional buy-in, and we did talk about that, the reality of it is what happens when those subsequent support people say, I will not attend? Where do those resources and supports come from? And again, we're only talking about 2 days after school that they would be required to be there for those planning purposes. The other 3 days would essentially be planning time on your own time. And so you're not on the clock on campus. You can plan at home if you choose to. That's the recommendation. That's the proposal. Excuse me, I keep saying recommendation. That's the proposal at this time.
So I know we had a pretty robust conversation about it when we had our team meeting last week. And so if our turnaround people want to, go ahead, Jenny.
I think the idea is wonderful. While our 21 turnaround schools have similar demographics, they also have very different demographics. So my question was, is it going to be like, is there going to be data taken? Is it going to be like district overseen by like district coaches too? Or is it going to be where the principals allocate that time how they want within that building? Because a concern with that is that some schools don't utilize it correctly. And if we're going to allot like, you know, money to like pay these people, like it should be good planning to move the district forward.
Well, yeah, great question. So move the school and the students forward based off their individual needs. So we will provide a framework for what should take place during that time. As far as micromanaging the process, the answer is no. Because quite honestly, part of this is how do we build that capacity? Because this, in these turnaround schools for employees who've been there a long time, these practices should already be happening anyways. So it's a means to reinforce that, plus provide additional incentive for that lost planning time that we forfeited in the last contract. As far as the building level principal, the building level leader will work with grade level teams and his or her support and resource staff to basically provide a schedule. They're not going to dictate what days and times you have to meet. You as a grade level team will basically share that information. We would like to meet on these days. That way you can remain flexible, especially when we come up against holiday weeks and things of that nature. Provide that autonomy and flexibility for you all as a group, because one of you or two of you may have childcare issues that pop up in 1 week. And we want to move our meeting day from Mondays and Wednesdays to Monday and Tuesday. The point is, we don't care when you plan. We just want to provide the structure and the time and the supplemental resources to make sure that, to your point, that planning is effective.
Okay.
Is it Mr. or Dr.?
You can call me Mr. You can call me Fred. It is not Dr. yet. As much as I was supposed to be done this month, I haven't written anything in over 6 or 8 weeks. So
Okay.
I'm working on it. I'm only in chapters 4 and 5 though. I'm almost.
Right. Well then, Mr. Fred, I have worked at 2 different turnaround schools and have been under 3 different administrators at those 2 different schools. And I will tell you that what happened traditionally was that they changed it from a 7-period day to an 8-period day. And 2 planning periods were given to us. One belonged to us. The other planning period belonged to the administration. And one of my administrators understood that he's not going to fill up every single one of the PLCs. And so if there was nothing that he had for us, he gave it to us. Another one of the administrators wasted our time beyond belief. She would have us bring in samples and a checklist of what we had to do. Micromanagement is not an appropriate term for what she was doing to us. And it turned into a complete waste of time when it was supposed to be collaborative planning. She would bring in a coach who would dictate what we were to be teaching, how we were to be teaching it, and basically trying to put us onto a script into every single classroom. And it turned into complete mayhem. And it turned into a waste of our time to be sitting in that room. The third principle, backing up just a little bit, when the turnaround schools were put into place, they went through the entire teacher rosters and they realized this teacher is on a needs improvement, this teacher's needs improvement. So all of these teachers were ripped out of the schools and put into other positions. And so you had all of these vacancies suddenly appear at the school. And so what ended up transpiring is either you had a brand new teacher that had to be hired into that classroom or a permanent sub, or if you were lucky enough to be able to bribe some teacher at some other high-performing school to go ahead and come to this school, put them in there. The majority turned into being new hires. And when that happened, as a result, the PLCs were directed towards these new hires who most of them did not have an education, highly qualified certificate. So we were forced to come in and sit there and be told, I've been teaching for 10 years, how to do classroom discipline. After 10 years, if I don't know how to do classroom discipline, I probably should not be a teacher. And to be sitting there going through, okay, well, you can try this technique, blah, 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 blah. It, again, turned into a complete and total waste of my time. How to create a lesson plan. Speaking of how to create a lesson plan, going back to that other principle, she dictated exactly what had to be in the lesson plan. And if you turned it in and it didn't have every single aspect of what she was looking for, it got rejected. And you had to start over from ground zero. So how to do this lesson plan. I'm getting frustrated just remembering all of this transpired.
So I guess, so just capturing some of our concerns that we had talked through on Friday, people being frustrated without differentiation of PD. If they're being required to come, you have different pots, brand new teacher needs something different than a 15-year teacher. That was a big thing, wasting time.
But to the gentleman's point, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Chris Olson.
Doctor? So I'll give you an honorary doctorate. So there's a couple things. Number one, you saw bleed over in what we should be doing as far as independent coaching support for teachers, right? Young teachers through their mentor, through informal mentorship, formal mentorship, as far as classroom management. That should never have happened during that consistent common planning time. It never should have. I will say, for the principal who gave you a dictated lesson plan script, unfortunately, depending on what year that was, hopefully it wasn't when I was bureau chief for school improvement, but that was a state mandate. We did mandate to all school districts. There were certain criteria and things that had to be in there. So respectfully, I don't know if we did that to her and ultimately to you, or if that was something that developed in your school over time. What I do hear resonate across all 3 examples, though, is how do we ensure that our building principals best support this practice? And we own that, we know that, we've already discussed this. This is a good example, as we talked about collaborative councils this morning. How do we put together convene a group of individuals, people such as yourselves who have had this experience, our building administrators, and then our district level resource support staff to explicitly outline, and we've done this in my previous district, we outlined explicitly what that PLC time should focus on, how to differentiate the level of supports and interventions for staff. Because as we identify those individuals, that time shouldn't be wasted there. They get a different support plan, right? That happens throughout the day in real time, right? On the job training, on the job TD, versus utilizing your planning time, because really that's not what that's intended to do. So I do think we have to put training wheels on it, which essentially defines for the employees, what should you do during this time? What should you be expected to do during this time? Not to give you a to-do list. That's not the point, because you best know as a grade level team what the needs of your students are, how are we going to best address those. Those other individuals, coaches and whatnot, are there as a supplement to say, okay, what do you need? Okay, I can fulfill that for you. That's the point. Now, if there's a strategy or something where you're all collectively struggling, then yes, let the coach lend their voice to how do we best address this team. For building level administrators, there's always that sense of uncertainty. And let's be honest, anybody who works in these schools is under a lot of pressure. Right?
Agreed.
You know, if you don't perform, you're going to get booted to another building. Administrators are constantly under the gun because if they don't perform well, they get booted to another building, or quite honestly, don't get reappointed if it's persistent over time. So I think we need to build a system that's fair. And so that's the commitment from us, is that we would use collaborative counsel as a means or a mechanism to address and outline this, and then we would share it out with everyone and say, okay, these are what you will do, this is what you don't have to do, this is what you don't do. And that addresses everyone.
Then that information not only should be going to the administrators, it should go to the teachers.
Absolutely.
So that we can call out, hey, your plan says you're supposed to be doing this, but instead you're wasting my time by doing this. So it quite often, forgive me, bargaining team, quite often in our district, the district makes decisions, but it never gets to us. And we do not know. There is a lack of communication in the terms.
We spoke at length about this today. And Ms. Yoakum and I had a very, very brief conversation about this at lunch when I first was transitioning about collaborative counsel. So it is a very intentional structure that we put together, everything from early childhood all the way through high school, and then for each of our respective groups. While it's not necessarily a decision-making body, it is a body where everyone in the room lends their voice to a topic that we're identifying. And let me give you an example. In my previous district, our elementary day was very short. It was the shortest in the entire state of Illinois, as a matter of fact. So we were looking to add an hour to the school day, paid, right? And at the end of the day, we ended up not doing it because of the cost analysis that resulted from it. But we brought teachers in, we brought administrators in, we brought district level admins in, and we talked through all the problems. That was the whole point, get everybody in a room who's going to be impacted by this and had to have them lend their voice to what are the barriers to this. So once we did that and we actually developed a plan, all of that was then subsequently communicated from our team, not from PEA, or in my case, lead, and not from district admin. We put out a collective communication because whatever collaborative council commits to is a collective we commitment. It is not when you go back to your building and you all of a sudden somebody challenges you on a decision that was made, you say, well, the district said, or we turn around and say, well, PEA blocked us from doing that. No. Once we come to an agreement, it is a collective agreement and it is we. We are moving forward together in unison. We may not have resolved every problem. Some of those things will still persist, but at least we made our best faith effort. And we addressed as many issues and barriers to being successful as we could. So hopefully that helps.
On your proposal, do you see it, do you envision it at least early on as more of a pilot, kind of see what works, what doesn't work, and then maybe tweak along the way?
Yeah, so yes, absolutely. So we would at least entertain this for the duration that we could for the CARES Act fund. Extend it out possibly to a third year, minimum 2 years, possibly to a third year. Absolutely, it would require constant revision and review. And then beyond that, the hope would be that we could collect and analyze data that may subsequently then support something like this on a more global scale. Everything I do is with an eye to the future, just to be clear.
So I like the collaborative council oversight, however we want to call it. So that was one thing that we had talked about too on Friday with our team, was like collaborative council, you call it, oversight committee, whatever, that we can meet at least once a quarter and review what's going on within these turnarounds in regards to this planning time, to see if we need to make any tweaks or adjustments to any agreements we have, and have representation from all stakeholders, at our turnaround schools that.
So having just discussed this with my team today, they've heard it pretty much for the first time today. So collaborative councils, if we get to an agreement where this is the direction we want to go, and it's my sincere hope we do, they meet minimally once per month.
Okay.
And then the two chairs, so they'd have two chairs, possibly three with Lisa, they help set the agenda, right? So we bring forward new ideas, new concepts, initiatives, and then typically from our collective bargaining units, we'd like to go back and review the following for a current implementation. It's not a contractual review. It has nothing to do with the contract, because whatever's decided in collaborative council then has to segue to this group to determine whether or not there's an impact to working conditions or if it's bargainable or those kinds of things.
I like that.
Typically ask that they meet once per month.
Yeah. That's pretty similar. I mean, probably our TAC committee is the most prime example of collaborative council that we have.
And I think I like that idea. I really do. And I think that goes quite well with section 2.5, because 2.5 talks about almost like an oversight committee, but relevant regarding the collective bargaining agreement, right? So I think that if that committee is meeting, and once you've got at some point, perhaps meeting with an oversight committee to see how does it impact the collective bargaining agreement, what makes sense, what doesn't, that sort of thing.
The only thing I would ask
right in there.
Keep in mind in consideration is we're expected to get school grades, school performance indicators here. We're supposed to get them last week. We didn't get them one time. As soon as we get those, we'll calculate school grades again. And then we have 30 days in which to make a decision as to whether or not to take a grade. Obviously, if a school letter grade goes up, all likelihood we're going to accept a grade. If your school's a C school and all of a sudden it drops down to a D or an F, I'm going to be honest with you, in all likelihood, we're not going to take the grade. However, I may come back and ask that we apply this to that school. We know that COVID significantly impacted our students. We know that schools that have consistently performed at a C or a B are likely to recover within a year. However, if I can provide the resources and support on the front end, I would ask that we expand the list from just the 21 turnarounds to any other school that when the data and analytics come through, we say.
So they're going to calculate for all schools, and then we get the, because I didn't know.
30 days in which to decide as to whether or not we're going to take the grades. Understand if we were to, and one of the reasons, two reasons not to take the grade, obviously it's a scarlet letter, we know that. It's going to be incredibly adversely impacting to the community, the perception of staff there, so we don't want to reinforce a negative stereotype in our buildings. But there are also no UNISIG dollars that come with this. Because no state is populating a new federal low performing schools list, you cannot take UNISIG dollars and give them to a new school. The state would have to identify new schools in order to justify those funds. So this would be my way of using semester dollars around to get to the same issue and provide them the supports that they probably need.
So this would be done in an MOU, because it would be.
Because we have to amend it on the grade. For this
Okay. Do you guys have a draft MOU that we could look at, or do you want to?
We'll draft it and send it.
We can look at that on Thursday then. Okay. All right. And if you can send it over, if you have electronically beforehand, I can send it to our people that are from turnaround schools specifically, and we can be able to talk about it on Thursday.
Certainly.
Okay. All right. So instruction during district mandated COVID quarantines.
Yeah. So the question for our students is, we know that we're going to go into another school year. Right now, we still remain mask optional. We're waiting to see what additional guidance may come from the CDC. I have seen the guidance that was released this morning from the American Pediatric Association, but by and large, it has no impact on state and federal policy. Just keep that in mind. So at the local level, the CDC deferred and says that school districts, in order to prioritize in-person instruction, that as much as they want us to continue with layered and tiered mitigation efforts, that you don't have to fulfill those at 100% in order to bring students back, but you should default and defer to local data. Right now, our local data, we're seeing an increase because of this second variant. However, we're waiting to get the numbers based off students, school-aged children. Right now, most of that variant is impacting individuals who have not vaccinated or have not fully vaccinated. So again, we're waiting on the explicit data from them. We will continue to provide layered tiered mitigations. There will be HEPA filtration in all of our classrooms. Angela was able to confirm that this morning. They continue to explore HVAC enhancements in our buildings, but there are some issues with ceiling heights, especially in some of our older buildings. And there's only so much ESSA dollars to go around. High touch, high point cleaning will continue. We will continue to contact trace. We'll continue to quarantine. And we're recommending masks for anybody who's not vaccinated. Of course, that could change. We'll have to wait and see what happens locally with conditions. To that extent, we know we're going to have students who quarantine. If you quarantine a student, and this was the examples I provided to Stephanie and to Tellado.
Oh, Wilfredo.
So about the rationale and the justifications. I always feel like I should give you a justification as to why I'm making a recommendation and a proposal. Again, I keep turning my back to you. So here's what happens. If a student gets quarantined for up to 14 days, and it's still the 14 days, we have looked to at some fast testing and some other things that the state may let us return students after a certain period, but I'll get into that later. The student's out for 14 days, here's what happens. You get notified, and typically within 48 hours, you're expected to put together a work packet for that student. Student takes it home. Off the top of my head, I'm gonna guess that at least 70% of the work packets that you send home do not get completed. So then what happens? It comes back. They still have to be remediated. They still have to do the makeup work, which adds an additional layer of work onto you as educators. And it furthers our frustrations that parents aren't engaged and students aren't engaged in the whole thing. So the reality of it is, why create that system? So the request right now is there a way for us to include students, only those students who are quarantined, to join your classroom in real time? You don't have to teach to them. You just, there's a misnomer there. We did this successfully in my last district. You turn on your camera. We provide a disclaimer to families that says, the teacher is not teaching to your kid on the computer. The camera was going to capture the teacher at the front of the classroom. If the teacher moves around the class, so be it. That same thing happens in the classroom in real with individuals any given time. I may be over here talking to this young lady and you may not be able to hear me, but that happens every day. But that the majority of core instruction would happen at the board for directions and guidance and things like that. That's one option. The other option is, can you create a period of time in your class where you deliver directions to the class, all right? You're scaffolding your instruction, and they're going into the I do, we do, you do, more importantly, and you transition over and get that student to join you for a few minutes so you can get them up to speed. So we're looking for options. It really becomes a lot more difficult at secondary. If you think about kids in advanced courses in particular, you miss 2 weeks of an AP class, you're literally chasing your tail for the next quarter. And you're chasing their tail too, right? So the whole point here is, how do we break down and create less work for you by just including those students who are quarantined of no fault of their own? That's the only group we're talking about. You can't go on vacation and say, I want to be remote. You can't say, I want to be an e-learner. We've already said we're not doing that. But we do need an option for those students who are quarantined if they can participate. So
a few of our concerns were technology, the turnaround, like when the kids didn't have the technology or didn't have those resources of Wi-Fi or whatnot, or they were with a different family member because their parents still had to work even though they were quarantined. We had suggested maybe getting videos from across the district that people have already created on Schoology, and that making kind of like a database where they could access it at different hours, because part of our problem, I know, in accessing from different schools was the kids, as much as you have done it and taught them how to do it in school, if there's not someone overseeing it, they don't get on. And there's not necessarily parents at all of our homes. We have a lot of different demographics throughout the district, where we have some that, you know, are real involved. And then the reality is most of our schools are not.
So if we were able to do, so I was going to mention videos as an option, but oftentimes that means you're either videotaping one of your lessons in real time, having a student assist you, or you're doing it on your own time. I'm completely open to that. Again, this is a topic that can come back to collaborative council to say, okay, how are we going to structure this? What are the options? The only thing I would ask though, if we're going to provide students with access to videoed lessons and examples and directions and whatnot, because I agree with you at the elementary level, a lot of those parents are going to go back. We did a math video series for all of our families. And the parents, because they didn't know Common Core math, they didn't know, well, some of them didn't know math. So it would help them as a reminder, you know, and we got a lot less pushback from families. So I would say yes. The only thing I would ask is at what point in a day can we schedule a time for that student to contact you if they need, he or she needs help?
We had thought too, like we have expert teachers throughout the district that we already have created like some exemplar videos where every teacher wouldn't have to necessarily do it, where there's, you know, here's the standards. You could pick from these which videos that you'd like to present to your students. And then like there could be a time where they could contact for help or whatever.
You just need to develop office hours or something. Even if it's during your class period, let's say your third period, you have a kid that's out. What level do you teach?
I teach elementary.
Okay. Who here teaches secondary? All right, so let's, okay. So say your third period class, you have a kid who's out, he or she's quarantined. The question would be, could you schedule a time with that student saying, okay, the last 15 minutes of class, I'll be online, ask me any questions that you have. That would be the only thing like a real-time kind of request. And it's more applicable at secondary than it would be at elementary, because a lot of times the families are waiting till the end of the day, mom and dad get home from work anyways to help. So I'm fine with that. I mean, that's our option. I just want something where the student gets something meaningful and relevant instead of a packet.
Yeah, we just thought
it's going to frustrate you and just frustrate them.
Last year, there was just a lot of inconsistencies across the schools with that. And then we were still trying to hold students accountable, but really it wasn't just a student, it was like holding families accountable. Like there just wasn't that communication there.
Absolutely. And Dr. Barrios and the team have assured me that logistically we can work through most of the connectivity issues, with the exception of one or two communities. And I won't say their names simply because I don't want anybody to say that I called them out in a public forum.
So I wanted to talk about, so I teach 6th grade science at Lake Alfred Polytech, and last year I taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade science, and so I took on 2 new content areas that I was not familiar with. Our district science contact for middle grades did an amazing job of creating fully engaging, already put together lessons on Schoology. And so if we had something like that, so she would have a 5-minute video about the expanse of space and why when we look at a model, they look like they're 2 inches apart, but they're so far apart you couldn't put them on a paper. And so you get that instruction piece, but she also had the assignment there, the graded piece there, it's all there. And then kids could email and ask you questions, but it was already created for us. So I'm not having to make 3 whole sets of instruction pieces. But the biggest piece for me is going to be, so if I'm a teacher who's an in-person teacher, my in-person class goes bell to bell. So the 15-minute thing at the end with 6th graders, 25 of them trying to do a lab, probably not going to be super productive. Sure. But also when you talk about like the cameras centered on the teacher and the kids are watching the lesson, most of my lessons aren't ever me talking. There's 5 different stations, my kids are doing these things. Having a camera on me, it's not going to help my kids at all because they're not going to get anything they were doing in class. So I think having that option of video-based instruction that has an assignment that helps sort of capture that knowledge, they're not going to get the same instruction they're getting in the classroom. We know that. But at least they can get sort of the basic concepts before they come back. I think that's going to be much more useful without burning out our teachers. Because if we try to get them to do both again, we're going to lose people. And I'm really worried about that.
But how would they be doing both? So these are your kids who you're teaching anyways. That was the whole point behind just letting kids join you.
But creating something
virtually in real time.
Creating something they can do at home is a whole new world of planning.
But let's own that now, because I think that's a logistical issue that really doesn't apply here anymore. If a student misses a lab, it's a hands-on activity, they can't do it at home. So you're going to have to schedule time for them to do that anyways, regardless.
Right.
We do that now when students are absent. But there are applications to the learning, right? The benchmarks and the standards that can be addressed. So to the extent that they can, and that was probably the part that I left out because Ms. Yoakum and I spoke about this. Let's say you're in welding today. You can't weld at home. So you're not going to attend class that day, but they would assign you something through Schoology that you can work on independently. So to that extent, yes, we can assist with that. But because your lesson plans vary so greatly, I don't think that my team at the district level can create that repository of lessons that comprehensively cover every topic.
No.
So it's going to have to be a shared responsibility. I think we could populate everything that we have and continue to work to reinforce those. But I think from your end as well, you're going to have to supplement that and say, okay, but here's what we're working on this week. This makes more sense.
Correct. But I think having that repository that teachers can choose from and be like, here's my standards, here's 8 resources I can use.
Absolutely.
We also have the CQUALMS tutorials, which are incredibly interactive for students that allows them to get instruction and feedback in real time without having a teacher right there with them and without having a parent that knows that information. And so making sure teachers are aware of that rather than trying to reinvent the wheel every time a kid goes home.
I'm one of the exceptions you were talking about. I teach at Bartow IB. I'm the only person who teaches my subject in the entire county. So I would just, whatever we decide on, just urge flexibility for the cases of the teachers who are teach the electives, the AP, the IB, the ACE, all those different courses. Sometimes we're the only teachers in the county, or there's maybe 2 or 3 of us. And a repository would be amazing, but that's going to work more for on level, for standard and honors courses. And as a teacher who's taught those before, that would be amazing, very amazing resource. But just to have flexibility, because and that we help parents to know that it's like you were saying, it's not going to be the same thing. Through our quarantine, even though we had the hybrid model in my class last year, through quarantine, had a lot of my seniors who got quarantined a lot of the time. And we would do exactly what you were talking about, and it came out with pretty good success for us. So I hope we can just have a flexible model that works in the future.
Yeah, I think we can provide options. I think ultimately, if we can come to an agreement and do an MOU, we can outline 3 or 4 options and how we would best address those. But then ultimately, it's going to fall to you and your building administrator to communicate those options to families and say, your child's going to receive one of the following. Because of the differences in programs, the differences of needs and things of that nature. So we need to be careful that we communicate that well. Because the last thing I want is parents coming back to you saying, well, they do this all the time. They compare notes, they shop, especially in a world of social media. Well, so-and-so at this school does it this way. Why aren't you doing it that way? We have to be careful with that.
One real quick thing on the student side, the accountability, because I offered, my Zoom was open all day, every day, the entire time, but whether or not they actually hop on.
Sure.
So say I do this, I create this lesson, or I open my Zoom and I'm there, not just, and I appreciate that you say that you understand that we're walking around the room, because the biggest issue I'm sure that we all agreed on with blended learning was trying to manage 2 different classrooms when you're only looking at one of them. But is there going to be some sort of accountability piece that falls back on us as teachers? Or is it going to be understood that you're on quarantine, this is not paid vacation? Because our students were automatically excused. So they felt like they did not have to log in or complete any of the work during their quarantine.
So they have an obligation to complete the assignments. But if you're opening up a whole other conversation about grading, I am not a believer that grading should be used as a reward or punishment. I am a firm believer that if I as an educator, if you as an educator assign something and you think it's of such quality and merit that it should be graded, and grading is about providing reinforcement as far as progress towards mastery, right? Not a reward or a punishment, then we should never stop requiring the student to complete the assignment. You reach a deadline, right? We all do. Where, okay, I've given you 5 or 6 chances, but you haven't done it, so I'm gonna have to zero it out from whatever our policy is at that point. But yes, there would be accountability, because this is what we call shared accountability. We have an obligation to provide the best possible access in real time that we can. They have an obligation to take advantage of that. And so if they don't, then we can show that we've done everything we possibly can, right? But some of our kids' lives are not perfect. I recall last year, I made more calls to DCFS in the first 2 weeks of school when we were remote than we did the entire 2 years prior. Because we were witnessing in real time kids being abused on camera, whether it was them or a sibling or something else. So it is a reality that some of our kids will not always engage. And some of them are not intrinsically motivated. And so I can go to class today or I can keep playing Call of Duty. You know, they're children. We have to keep that in mind as well. But we have an obligation to assist you with that, right? So if you have a student who's unreceptive and is not responding, then the counselor or the administrator and others should be contacting the family and say, hey, you need to get on, you know. But we have to work through that. But I completely agree. I mean, we want that shared accountability.
Do we have a concept or a plan for kids who are needing like 504 ESE phone supports? Because those kids have a hard time in class with adults.
So for some of them, they can get telehealth, teletherapy. They can also get scheduled appointment services. And so there are options where we can, even with bring them on campus after hours or at other times so we can best serve their needs. Or like we do with itinerants for hospital homebound, we can provide supports at home.
I have a quick question on that.
Wait. So generally at bargaining, the audience doesn't get comments. We had particular people chosen to talk specifically to, so sorry. Generally, I don't want to open that can of worms. And I don't think your side does either.
Thanks for the time.
Yeah, thank you. So can we also have a MOU to look at for instruction during quarantines as well?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. Let's just keep going down. All right. So the next thing on our agenda was we have paraeducator Article 8. Or do we want to do this and then we'll look at it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And so the one thing in para Article 8 that we would like to discuss is the paraeducator subpay. And then I'll let Wilfredo.
We're just updating it.
Okay.
It hasn't been, I believe it hasn't been updated for a while. And
8.2, right?
From 20 to $50 per day, and from $10 to $25. Those are, we've added the sentence, principal supervisor will only assign paraeducators to substitute in half-day or full-day increments for the same teacher. So right now it's just 20, I think the MOU was 3015. The contract is 2010. The MOU has expired. I think it makes sense to update it to 5025. It's still a way less, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Than a
Still
Kelly
significant
sub.
savings if you can't get a higher Kelly sub.
It's still way under what Kelly subs charge.
So what's the rationale then for increasing it from 30 to 50?
So we found
it's almost double.
So again, it's still significantly less than if you had to hire a Kelly sub to do that job. And when we had put a survey out in the end of May for our bargaining units, one thing they said is they hate subbing, but it would make it a little bit more palatable to them if the money had even increased from what they were paid this year.
And we don't know, at least I don't know how much you spend on Kelly subs and what cost goes into, paras being substitutes, that sort of thing. But I would imagine, at least in my view, it would be more advantageous to have one of my own, right, substitute as opposed to a Kelly sub. So if there's a difference, so for example, if you're spending, these are ridiculous numbers, right? But if you're spending $100,000 on Kelly subs and only say 15 grand on paraeducators that are subbing, then even if it went up to 50, it's still cost savings there. Either way, we're looking to at least update that it's called a stipend. No, that cost, that supplement, that's what it says.
And then what about the language the principals will only assign pairs to sub and half day or full day increments for the same teacher.
So that ensures more that they get that unfilled job number and are not just directed to go sub 1 or 2 periods here and then not get that.
Mhm.
And we know in the language that it says, you know, they can refuse it if there's not an unfilled job number, but more times than not, you know, especially our support staff tend not to balk up against directives like that, even when they don't get offered unfilled job numbers. And so with the way Kelly Subs works is that they only do half day and full day increments. And so that's just one more safeguard in place for our paraeducators to get an unfilled job number if it is in fact, you know, a need.
And it should be happening.
To substitute.
Yeah, because we've dealt with issues where the number isn't been provided and the paraeducator is substituting. And I recall at least one case where I think she did it for quite a bit, and then Dana Torres was able to help out with it, and we documented and whatever. So the language is there to help reinforce what's already there. That's all. It's not designed to.
Well, I guess my issue is if we look at, I don't necessarily have a problem with the will only assign pairs the sub and half day or full day increments. I think it's the same teacher that causes some pause for concern. So from a school-based perspective, if it's to me, I don't necessarily think that it should matter if it's the same teacher or not, even if it's a half day.
So that's how they get the unfilled job number.
Right, but if there's something, if let's say the para can do 2 sessions in the morning and do 1 session in the afternoon, that's still a half day increment is what I'm saying. If you split it.
But they wouldn't get paid for it because there wouldn't be a job number, because the way teachers.
The 2 and the 1.
But the way teachers have to take off for that, it's literally your half, or your full. You don't get
the way I thought it was coded, and I talked to I think Chris about this the other day, is that if it splits, it's easier for them to assign throughout the day rather than just you have to be assigned to Stephanie Yoakum's class for that full half day.
But then so I guess the question then comes in is how are those other folks getting paid? You know, if you're saying, well, Stephanie's going to this room for first and second period, but then going to this other room for fourth period, then how is the other person because it's going to have to be covered possibly for third period. We have run into a lot of issues with paras having a problem with their site and they're not getting unfilled job numbers because of the splitting like that. And then it becomes an issue to where they're not getting paid, but then they didn't refuse the job and they really could have, according to the current language.
I see this. How many of those have you run into? Because I've run into the opposite in terms of particularly, especially when I want to pay this person and I want to give them a full half day, but I can't. Now I got to find somewhere else to put them.
So
is that allowable?
So like if I'm subbing for you for the morning, that's an unfilled job number. That's a half day. But then Tony's out for the second half of the day, right? I can sub for Tony the second half because that's another unfilled job number. Mm-hmm. That's another half day increment. Right. But where we have had the issue, and it's been 10, 15 that I can go through my head right now.
Well, this is my first time hearing about this.
Well, we've been able to kind of solve it at the local level.
Yeah, right.
So it hasn't really risen to that level where you guys have had to get involved. But it's just that we've even had to deal with it to begin with. And we think that this would be a clearer way to solve that from even happening, right?
Can you provide us with what you're saying, what your explanation was, what how they break it up? Can you provide us with a written account of what that is so that that might help ease our concerns?
Of course. And so Marianne has something to say on this.
So one of the things we ran into a lot was to avoid paying the money. They would, some principals would say, you do a period, you do a period. Then nobody, even though you had a job number, nobody got the pay because nobody got to do the full half or the full day.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was a big problem as well.
But we don't want to, I'm not proposing.
Parse that job out to 5 people.
Well, not even necessarily that. I don't want to not pay people for them doing the job. I'm just trying to figure out from our end, it seems like that was an issue in terms of maybe Marianne is better assigned to, let's say, periods 3, 4, and 5 in the afternoon for Tedra's class. and Stephanie's better assigned to the first 2 periods. So for us, maybe it's how to pay them for working that time, not necessarily
half day or full day.
Mm-hmm. Because what we're trying to do is just get the positions filled. And maybe Marianne, wait, help me. Maybe Marianne is a better disciplinarian, particularly in the afternoon. And I need a stronger support in there in the afternoon for that student population.
So is it possible, and this could be, you could turn around and say it's a accounting nightmare, but would it be possible to prorate it per period? So that you could say, Marianne did first, second, and 5th period, because we had the middle part of the day covered through specials, say.
Let's see, let me talk to Dana.
And we had suggested half and full because that's just how teachers have to put in with Kelly subs, is a half day, full day. And that made sense to us. And we, we're trying to come up with a way to solve that issue that we were coming up against.
So I personally don't mind the prorating per period, but let me talk to Dana, et cetera. Yeah. And then go from there.
So with the amount, is your team okay with the amount? And then we're looking at the sentence for the
I want to see how much we spent overall on Paris. Let me see how much we spent overall on Paris.
And Kelly subs probably, right? You want to contrast, look at that.
Well, yeah.
Would that data tell you I contracted a Kelly sub because, well, hang on, I got it. I answered my own question.
Okay.
On the prorated, we just take a look at it. We're not agreeing or disagreeing. We just want to know.
Okay. All right. That's the only thing in para 8. So we so the next thing, I know that the district wanted to discuss network managers and the para network managers.
Hold on. Can we table that one? I wanted Tina here.
Oh, sure. You want to talk about it on Thursday?
Can you talk about something else and let me have her come down?
Oh, sure. Okay. All right. Well, then our next thing. Let's save this for the end.
Your address again?
730 East Davidson Street. Okay. Everything's out of order. Actually, let's just go ahead and do this. So we are, for the health insurance, we are proposing a status quo. And so this is the same plan design as last year. So we wanted to get it on the table that we want status quo for health insurance. So I copy and pasted that table from the signed MOU with the plan design is the same as what we have in place now. Then
no.
Do you want water?
Water?
No, thank you.
I'll take it.
Okay, sorry.
So the next thing, let's talk about supplements. So we have here are the ESP Appendix C supplements. The paraeducator is going to mirror that, but they don't have their separate appendix for supplements like the ESPs do. And then the teacher supplements for Appendix C. And so with the ESP Appendix C, and I believe it would also be Appendix C for paraeducators too, but that's all with their salary stuff. So I didn't print their whole grades and salary schedules. We are proposing to add in a health contact supplement. And this is actually across all 3 contracts. If they're a health contact, they would have a supplement of $200 for that added responsibility of being the backup to the nurse at the school. We are also proposing for our support staff, if they work in a Title I school, and this says ESP because it's Appendix C, but this is also in the para, that they would have a supplement of $200 for working in a designated Title I school. And that kind of, no, that you're looking at the teacher one. I'm looking at the ESP.
Is there a para one too?
So the para one doesn't have a separate supplement appendix like the other 2 do. And so we actually have the para one on paper, but it has our salary stuff on there. So we didn't want to hand that over to you today because we're going to go into subcommittee with that. But the para and the secretary clerical one, it's the same. Health contacts would get $200 for being a health contact. And the Title I supplement would be $200 for support staff at a district designated Title I school. And then Appendix C, which is the teacher salary supplement. We also propose health contact would get $200. And then to line us up with statute from 2011, with when pay for performance first came into play, there are certain supplements that we should have in place that we don't, and we've been dinged several times on different audits for not having them. And it's a Title I supplement for teachers working in a Title I school, a supplement for professional services contract teachers who have a highly effective rating that are on the grandfathered schedule, and a supplement for teachers working in critical shortage subject areas. And so all of those are $500 proposals. We are also, if you look at the table at the very back in the vocational and the senior JROTC, we are wanting to add into the vocational teacher supplements under vocational clubs. There was a specific club that seemed to have been left off of the list. FPSA, Florida Public Service Association, that should also be receiving that club supplement as well. And the feedback we got from our JROTC supplement was that there are about 10, when I had surveyed the JROTC people, about 10 people getting this supplement right now, or that are eligible that do this work, but only like 5 or 6 of them are getting the supplement because they're 10-month people. And so we wanted to strike through 10-month schedule because there are 12-month JROTC people. While they're getting money because they're working 12 months, they're also doing the extra work of these supplements with drill and raiders and rifle. And so it was unfair to leave them out because they're doing the extra work with these teams. And that would be a very small amount of money to the district to add in these 4 or 5 12-month JROTC folks that are doing the work. And supplements have languished. You know, we tend to ignore supplements when, you know, there's not very much money on the table. And to be in line with what—
Didn't we just do supplements last year?
We added wrestling to girls, but we didn't add any money into any of the other supplements that are— we haven't done that in years.
We added the fire academy. We added—
I'm talking across, we added little things here and there, but I'm talking overall money into the actual supplements that are already here, not adding new supplements. So we've added a few new supplements over the last couple of years, like fire and JROTC. We added a girls wrestling, but that doesn't address the already established supplements that haven't seen movement for quite a while. And so we're proposing to add $1,000 to each supplement. Per supplement. We are about half of what just coaches in general. Let's just take coaches. We pay coaches about half of what they can make in surrounding counties, coaching football or their corresponding. And so we're losing coaches. We're losing talent, and not just in coaches, but in all of these other areas because we haven't addressed these supplements. And so that is—
not everyone gets a supplement, right?
No.
Right. You know what pay supplements now?
We had asked for that information, but we did not get that back.
I will get it.
But you can't get it, right?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
These don't reflect the new proposed rate.
No. I didn't change every single one of them. I just put up in the bullet, PA proposes to add $1,000 to each existing supplement dollar amount. So I didn't change I didn't go through and change any dollar amount. I just said we would add 1,000. And we can change the table, once we.
So like stuff like this, it would have been beneficial to have before the meeting. Then we could have costed it out and then had a true conversation about it.
Sunny Stevenson toward North First Avenue.
All right. So.
Get out of here.
No, right? So I think in the future, when you have something like this, it would be helpful for us.
Okay.
This is, our point is, when we ask for proposals in advance and topics like this in advance, so we can come to the table and have an intelligent discussion. Because if we would have had this in advance, then we could have said yay or nay and then signed to whatever. At this point, we can't sign to it, we can't agree to it because we don't know the overall cost.
We weren't expecting.
Stuff like this would be helpful and beneficial for us overall.
Yeah, we weren't expecting for you to sign off on it today. The information that we had was that we requested the cost of supplements, and for whatever reason, you weren't able to come up with it. That's sort of our
Was that recently?
When we had the big request, when Kevin had sent that out, I believe, we had followed up again, and Paula had asked what we were referring to, and then we didn't get anything back.
I will check with the team.
Okay. And then.
But I think the important, sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
But I think the important part of all that, right, is that we're looking for, we got to update, we should be updating these supplements, right? I mean, our opening commentary is $1,000, but we're looking to definitely update those supplements. We don't know how much you spend on them right now. We don't know, I mean, that sort of thing, but I think that can be easily worked out, understanding how many get it, what's the cost, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the overall picture is that we're definitely looking to update those supplements.
All right, and then we just have two more.
Activity pay?
Outside of the network manager, we have teacher appendix D, activity pay, and then teacher appendix B, the advanced degree supplement.
I think in those two, basically it goes along with the same idea, right? So updating it. Well, I'm sorry. Let me go back to appendix B. Oh, that's the next one. So nothing, earth-shattering here other than we want to update it. We think $35 for doctoral special ed makes sense. Our master's 30, and for the bachelor's 25. Not sure when was the last time that was that those hourly rates were improved upon, but we certainly like to see those improved, and we think that the values that we put forth make sense.
And then the last thing would be, it is found in teacher appendix B. You'll see here that we've already kind of settled on the subcommittee for the CSIA. We've already talked about that. And then the last thing would be the advanced degrees. And again, we languish when you compare it to other counties.
We agree, but we can't. We won't agree to who our representatives are. That's up to us to decide.
Yeah. I'm okay with that. We were just putting a suggestion because we need decision makers. We need a finance person. So Heather's going to be there. And so that's fine. So we're meeting with the subcommittee. But anyway, the language part is in the advanced degrees for appendix B. And we thought it made sense to be a function of the teacher base salary, so that as the base salary moves up, that these supplements no longer languish, that they would go up as the teacher base salary improved instead of it being just a static supplement.
You're nearly doubling them.
Yes, because we're about half of what other counties in Central Florida and bigger counties around the state offer for master's, specialist, and doctoral degrees. We're right about half. And so we are proposing to double them.
So I think part of this is if how do we get from A to B, right? So if it's double, I think we should look at the numbers, but also if it's doable, then what's the process to get us there? In other words, traditionally is, you know, on an effective date, this happens, right? We shouldn't just kind of lock ourselves into that and really be thinking through, okay, if we agree with this, if this makes sense, what's the process of getting there? Because if we do effective date July 1st, that's just, we just don't have the funding for that. As an example, I'm not saying that that's the case, but I really want to think outside the box on some of this stuff to see if there's something there that we can agree upon.
Can you send us everything electronically?
Yes, ma'am. You sure can. I'll do that right when we finish. Okay. And the last thing on our list was the network manager. Is Dr. Barris able to come over?
I texted her. I thought she was on her way. Essentially, though, I'll go ahead and get started. We sent you a proposal or just a job description on 420. And so what Dr. Barrios did was look at with the district's heavy reliance on technology this year. Our reliance overall on the network managers, the peer network managers, and the teacher network managers became just abundantly clear, right? We need teachers and people that have the expertise to really serve our students and serve the district well. So one of the things that we did is look in terms of what could we do, right? So we proposed a job description to you. Hopefully you've had a chance to review it. That specifically combines the paras and the teachers. One of the issues that we're having is we are not able to really attract good, true network management talent, right? A lot of times what principals are doing is saying, hey, Tony, you've been a teacher for 30 years, right? You've been a great teacher. I'm going to put you in this job over here. But Tony doesn't necessarily know the roles and the responsibilities of it. On the flip side, then I may hire Laura, who's a para network manager, and she may know the roles and responsibilities, but she can't, for whatever reason, she can't be a teacher. And so I could have two separate schools right across the street from each other with and Laura's school could be larger, right? And so she has a larger footprint. She's a lot more accountable, but then she's only getting paid the para rate. So what we tried to do is just be fair and equal across the board. Hence, we proposed a starting salary of $28,000. What that would encompass is not necessarily our teachers, but our paras. So all the paras that are currently there, we would bring them up to $28,000, right? Our teachers would remain where they are. However, when they retire from that position or when they attrition out from that position, wherever they are, then that would be replaced with a regular network manager position, not a teacher, not a para, but just the network manager proposed position. Overall, I think the initial cost, I don't know what the initial cost is, but I want to say it's going to save us about $200,000 moving forward annually. Do you have it? I'm looking. I want to say it's going to save us about $200,000 moving forward. And then it will at least provide us or be able to provide us with the expertise in the area as well. The other thing is we'll be able to hire, when we hire from the outside, what we could do is then, the $28,000 is then competitive with outside salaries as well. So that was one of the things that Tina looked at in terms of how are we actually able to attract talent. So when I attract somebody that is a network manager, let's say for some other company, they make between $28,000 and let's say $30,000, right? But then if it's actually $27,000 and $30,000. But if she's on her way. But once I offer them the para network manager salary, that is way too low for them for the job responsibilities. So that's how we came up with this, and that's where we are.
So we agree that the parent network manager and the teacher network manager disparities is it needs to be addressed because you have teacher network managers making double, even triple what parent network manager counterparts are making for the same job. And so we wanted to, because we know we have still a good amount of teacher network managers still in the district with parent network managers making so much less. And we are so reliant on them with technology. We cannot run our schools without these network managers anymore. Not only do they help run with state testing with devices, I mean, we can't, a lot of our phone systems don't work without internet now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've got to have internet and network reliability in place for our schools to actually function, for our teachers to do their job, for our administrators to do their job. You need a good network manager. And so it made sense to us to move your parent network managers into the teacher contract and place them on the experience level that corresponds with their level of experience, so that you don't have teacher network managers and parent network managers. They're all on the same schedule. You already have teacher network managers that are going to be there on that schedule, and we need them. We are reliant on them to help run our schools. We want to make sure that they're being paid accordingly. So we're just proposing that all parent network managers move into the teacher contract under the grandfathered schedule where teacher network managers currently are, because they don't need a teaching certificate to be on that schedule. And we've had some teacher network managers that were teachers, because that's how this all came about, 2 decades ago when we started needing people in this role, that they don't have a teaching certificate anymore. They let it lapse because they're a network manager now. And they have no desire to go back into the classroom, but they're still in the teacher contract because that's where they started. And so you don't need a teaching certificate to be a network manager. And so we felt that that made the most sense as far as the pay schedule goes. $28,000 is still vastly low compared to what we need for our schools at this point. And so we're okay with the job description as long as they need to stay in our collective bargaining agreement. But we are proposing that they move into the teacher contract and out of the para network manager and out of the para contract.
So we'll take a look at it. Okay.
Can I ask a question so that I'm understanding?
Yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
Okay. Looking at this is proposal, level, so I'm assuming these are not years of experience.
Correct.
Would it be possible for someone who is brand new to the district to come in toward level 49?
So the way they evaluate, I don't believe so. They would have to have 49 years of verifiable one-to-one experience.
So they are similar to years of experience.
Initial placement?
Initial placement, yeah, the initial placement maybe, but then there's an initial placement salary, a chart that we go by.
Okay.
And so we would have to look at that,
okay,
determine what, but I don't think anyone has ever been placed on level 49 coming in. That's what we try to do, Brandon, is keep it as equitable as possible so that people coming in don't make more than our current employees. So that's what I'm saying, that I don't foresee that happening.
Can you also provide the initial placement that you would use with this proposal?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's all we had. Was there anything else that your side wanted to discuss? Let me see.
Not right now. We talked about planning time. I think the planning time, to be frank, has been an issue at a lot of our schools other than the DA schools. And so be prepared in the proposal that we give to you for it to include more than the DA schools.
You're talking about what Mr. Hyde had talked about with the MOU planning time?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm saying more than the DA schools.
Yeah.
So it's going to be inclusive of likely all of our schools, not just the DA schools. That's really it that we have so far.
Okay.
So we'll get back to you. We'll review everything and get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you tomorrow afternoon. And then I'll call Lisa now and see if she can have folks, if she can't, have people there so that we can talk about that. And then,
we're going to discuss the